Every time you step into a skyscraper in Manhattan, drive across a bridge in London, or board a train in Tokyo, you're touching the work of a man who controls more steel than entire nations produce. 28% of the world's steel flows through his furnaces. Yet if you asked 100 people on the street to name him, 99 would stare back blank. This is the mathematics of invisibility. When you own the skeleton of civilization, you don't need to own the headlines. Lakshmi Mittal. The name means nothing to most, but his signature sits on the contracts that built Dubai's skyline, Shanghai's subway system, and half the oil rigs drilling in the North Sea. ArcelorMittal, his steel empire, generates more revenue than Goldman Sachs. His personal wealth peaked at $68 billion, making him richer than most sovereign wealth funds. Yet he operates from the shadows of global finance, a ghost in the machine of modern infrastructure. 1950, a cramped house in Rajasthan, India. The British had left, but they'd built the railways, and railways need steel. Mittal's father ran a small steel mill, the kind that melted scrap metal in clay furnaces and sold rebar to local contractors. Lakshmi learned the trade by watching margins, not mechanics. At 15, he could calculate the profit on a ton of steel faster than his father's accountants. By 21, he'd spotted the flaw in the family business. They were manufacturing. They should have been integrating. In 1976, he took $20,000 and left for Indonesia, not to build a bigger steel mill, to build a steel ecosystem. Before we dive into how Mittal engineered the largest steel empire in human history, hit that subscribe button. We're uncovering the financial architects who built the modern world from the shadows, and most of their stories have been deliberately erased from public memory. Indonesia, 1976. While Western steel companies fought unions and environmental regulations, Mittal built his first integrated mill in a country with cheap labor and zero oversight. The blueprint was simple. Own the iron ore mines, own the coal mines, own the shipping routes, own the furnaces, own the finishing mills. Vertical integration across 4,000 miles of supply chain. Western competitors had to buy their raw materials at market prices. Mittal's materials cost him extraction wages plus transport. When global steel prices dropped 30% in the 1980s, his competitors bled cash. His margins actually improved.
But geography was just the foundation. The real innovation was arbitrage, not currency arbitrage, but regulation arbitrage. Every time a Western government tightened environmental standards, Mittal moved production to a country that hadn't. Every time labor costs rose, he relocated to regions with cheaper workforces. By 1990, he had steel mills across Trinidad, Algeria, Mexico, and Kazakhstan. Not random locations. Each one was positioned at a regulatory sweet spot where he could produce steel at 40% below Western costs while meeting zero local environmental standards. His competitors were manufacturing steel. He was manufacturing competitive advantage.
But steel isn't just metal, it's leverage, and leverage always extracts a price from someone else's balance sheet. In Kazakhstan, his mills consumed entire rivers for cooling systems, while local communities lost access to clean water. In Romania, his facilities generated more sulfur dioxide emissions than the rest of the country combined. Workers in his Indian mills earned $2 per day handling molten metal in facilities with safety standards that would have triggered criminal charges in Detroit. The efficiency wasn't just about technology. It was about externalizing every possible cost onto populations with no legal recourse.
Then came the mathematical problem that kills all empires, succession mathematics. By 2010, Mittal's children had inherited positions in the company, but none had inherited his instinct for regulatory arbitrage. His son Aditya focused on sustainability initiatives, exactly the kind of overhead that had crippled Western steel companies in the first place. Environmental compliance costs began eating into margins. Labor disputes multiplied as governments tightened oversight. The machine that had run on externalizing costs suddenly faced internalized accountability. Revenue dropped from $79 billion in 2011 to $64 billion by 2015. Today, most financial textbooks mention ArcelorMittal as a footnote in globalization case studies. They don't mention the regulatory arbitrage. They don't mention the environmental externalities. They don't mention the labor conditions. The official narrative focuses on emerging market opportunities and international expansion. This isn't historical accident, it's narrative laundering. When you control the steel that builds the universities where the textbooks are written, you influence which stories get preserved and which ones get dissolved in regulatory euphemisms.
But the blueprint survives. Every major commodity empire today uses Mittal's model: vertical integration, plus regulatory arbitrage, plus externalized environmental costs. Glencore in mining, Cargill in agriculture. The names change, but the mathematics remain identical. And Mittal's personal wealth, now $37 billion, still flows through the same offshore structures he built in the 1980s. The steel mills may face oversight, but the capital streams remain flowing through Dutch holding companies and Luxembourg tax vehicles that most governments still can't penetrate.
Wealth isn't just capital, it's infrastructure for avoiding accountability. Mittal proved that in a globalized economy, the fastest path to monopolistic returns is to find the jurisdictions where externalities don't count as costs. The man who bought the world's steel didn't pay the world's price for producing it. He just moved the bill to communities that couldn't collect. If this deep dive into financial shadow history resonated with you, drop a flame emoji in the comments to show you made it to the end, or tell me which invisible titan you want exposed next. The global economy has more ghosts than most people realize. Time has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.